that in terms of the events in Norway earlier this year, we mentioned the targets were symbolic. Firstly, car bombing the political quarter, a general message, and then the ferocious attack on community youth from a party seen as too inclusive. So if you want to take a message, there's one there for every political activist, but it's not the new one. And we saw this a little bit reflected as well this summer with one of our own members of the European Parliament in the UK, Sajid Karim, who has been forced to move house because his house was overrun by the EDL in a very straight message about the this type of politics. But certainly the Islamophobia side of it was absolutely crystal clear. And I think that the state and the public reaction in terms of that message, the clear statement of the values of the country and the closing political ranks was extremely powerful and in marked contrast to a lot of mixed messages that we see from political leaders across the European Union and beyond. It's called the same that within Europe as a whole, within the European Union, we're seeing a growing number of parties that have various facets in common. Some of them are very much built on the sort of more the form that we're used to, the straight, racist, fascist, more easily identifiable parties. But we've got a growing number as well of the populist parties, who draw a lot of strength from that agenda, and where the overlap is extremely clear once you really start looking, but can be close to begin with. And certainly, as we were hearing, part of what they're about is this contestation of who belongs. Absolutely clear. And it's very much at the moment based on Islamophobia, because that's less protected in law than racism. In terms of anti-discrimination legislation, etc. We can see the Islamophobia side even in the proposal we've got at the moment in the Civil Liberties Committee as part of our proposed work programme for next year, where the non-at-screen, the non-aligned, many of whom come from the far right, have put in a proposal about how we should have an examination of the role of Sharia law within the European Union. Now that proposal will be rejected. Those parties will then proclaim that this is almost a form of martyrdom, that they are not allowed to talk about these issues, that they are being silenced. But one of the other things that they're using in terms of whether it's discussions about bans on burqa and niqab is that this is being done in the name of secularism, hard fought for in certain countries, France being one of them, and also in the name of women's rights. For some of the leaders, it's about gay rights, Pim Fortuyn himself, homosexual. And they're trying to use this move of anybody who is a follower of Islam doesn't share our values. The our being self-defined, values being self-defined, because you'll also find a lot of these same people who seem to be so concerned about women's rights actually thinking that a woman's place is still in the home and having as many babies as possible. So there's an inherent contradiction in what they're saying, but the language in which they express their views is one which is designed to actually have a wider purchase than simply saying we don't like foreigners. Or indeed, they don't like their own citizens who happen to follow a different religion to the one that they think the European Union is based on, which also shows there's no union to the history of the European Union. It's reflected too in a whole of the discourse about Turkish membership of the European Union. Their discourse is also around this division between the political elite, probably one of those, I don't think myself to be elite anymore, but that's how they would see those of us that defend universal values of human rights. These are the political elite who don't understand the lives of common people, of ordinary people. You know, these are the people who live in their ivory towers, have no connection, don't speak a language that others understand, don't care, are divorced, from the reality of life for so many ordinary people. They have a play as well, very strongly a lot of the time, with an anti-European Union rhetoric. Now, there are a lot of reasons to be against the European Union, for some people. But the way in which they use it now combines very much with the idea of these are the foreigners that you cannot stop coming into your own country. We heard it on Question Time the other night. Why is it that we have to have these doctors, these medics from elsewhere in the European Union? Why can't we train our own? But the answer to that is not that very bad, apart from the fact that we do train our own, people say migrate. Because, of course, they never talk about the 1 in 10 estimated UK citizens who live or work abroad. Because we're expats, we are not migrants. It's part of our right to roam the world. But what we also see from a lot of these parties, as well as a very, very strong anti-Roma rhetoric, and that this is also part of the heritage that they have, is very, very strong anti-Roma rhetoric. And I'm really pleased that Amnesty is here today with their campaign on Roma rights. You might be aware as well that the British government is not really doing much on the EU's Roma strategy because it doesn't really think there's a lot of relevance to the UK. So the parties also draw too on anti-Semitism. You still hear that language. And you hear a lot of crocodile tears from. You know, yes, there are a lot of poor people in the country, but we have to remember that we have pensions here. We don't have enough to eat, and we can't eat their homes. That's true. That doesn't mean to say that we don't support the stop aid to local countries. But for them, their view is that minorities are privileged, that there is a reverse discrimination at work here, which privileges minorities and stops the rights of our people. So they present themselves as defenders of history, defenders of values. They colonize the language of freedom, of rights, of democracy, and supported in this very much by the populist press. Built on the journal sort of rags, had a headline saying, "Built dares to say it, we stand up for the freedom of the press." The freedom of the press was never being challenged, but you set up this idea that there's a taboo here, you are going to break this taboo, you are going to say the unsayable. This somehow makes you a defender of freedom of speech, of right democracy, when of course their whole agenda is actually about undermining those values of right, freedom and democracy. So I think in terms of when we're looking at how we fight back on this, we shouldn't forget a lot of the things that we've already been doing. In terms of anti-racist education, there's somehow been a feeling in many places that we did that in the 70s and therefore somehow society has changed. It hasn't. There are things that we need to keep doing because the issues are still there. But we need also to close the political space for these parties that feed on hate and division. So we need to deal with issues around housing, employment, income, care for people. The questions as well about how we protect employers, defend the rights for all in that situation. So we also need to still be strong on defending rights for migrants, the right to seek asylum. It's the 60th anniversary this year of the 1951 Geneva Convention. And there are still people saying, oh, well, we're not really sure it's got the purpose of moving age. Anybody fleeing for their life from an oppressive regime needs that convention and they need it to work. I think we also need to be standing up for the freedom of movement for EU nationals and not watching the borders going up again in Europe. If anything, we should be moving to get the borders down further afield. We need to stand up for equal rights at work, equality of pay, and argue for the living wage for all. So that the political space for these parties to be able to say, you know, the common person is not represented, is a lie. And we make that very, very clear. Because this is a battle about the sort of society that we want. A society which is inclusive, which delivers justice, which stands up for universal human rights and freedoms. And that political opposition has to be there, strong and visible, because it closes the political space for those parties with their agenda hate. And at the European Parliament, we're working on that, cross-party, with those of us that are really interested in how we find a way to effectively combat the rhetoric, the political positioning of these groups at that level. And just as we're doing it there, movements such as this today are important. We need to grow them. We need to show that there is hope in the political field and that these parties